Thank you for your consideration.
You better tuck in that tail, little duck.
Ladies and gentlemen, the star-crossed lovers from District 12.
This is the time to show them everything.
I volunteer as tribute.
Well, I don't know how else to put this. Make sure they remember you.
Suzanne had published the Underland Chronicles with us, which is for a younger audience, but also about war in some way. And so she came to us with a proposal for a YA series that she wanted to do something a little bit older, but also dealing with war in a different way. One night she was flipping channels on TV, and so flipping between war coverage and reality TV, and realized there was something there, that there was a strange connection between the two of them, and she thought about it some more. And it harkened back to the Theseus myth, which of course has people sort of giving tributes to a higher government, and just all of these elements came together. And certainly we were struck by the premise and the kids killing kids idea, but from the get-go, it really was described to us as being about war, and I think we knew, because Suzanne had written the Underland Chronicles, that she wasn't going to be exploitative. We knew that the violence was there as a critique of violence, and so because of that, what would have been scary subject matter in the hands of another author, we really trusted Suzanne to deal with it responsibly, and we knew that if there was going to be violence, there was going to be violence for a reason. I can honestly say that it came in amazing shape. I mean, literally, Kate, Jen Rees, and I, the three editors who worked on it, we got it on a Friday, we read it over the weekend, and we came in on Monday and just looked at each other and went, wow, wow. I mean, we just knew that this was one of the best things we had ever worked on. And really, the editorial process was just more one of clarification, but that was really it. The story itself and all of the twists and turns and the chapter enders that made you go, oh my gosh, those were all in there. And really, the editorial process was more just talking it over and making sure that her vision was very clear on the page to the people who were not her.
Well, I think a lot of what is categorized as young adult fiction now writes down to the reader, and there is a sense that they are being very careful not to address certain things, or they talk their way around them, or relationships are depicted in a certain sort of surface way. I'm not sure that I would categorize her books that way. I think it's just speculative fiction. I think she's using the same kinds of tropes that science fiction writers have always used.
You know, it was one of those books that it is a YA book, but take out the fact that they're kids, it's got like mature themes, things that I think anyone of any age could really get into.
I'm a little confused about what that genre actually means, because it seems to cover a pretty wide range of material. You can have something that's a very basic, simple, coming-of-age romance story, or you can have this, which is a dystopian future view of a gladiator sport, essentially. I don't think those are the same genre. I think there's a big catch-all that is being used now to sell these books.
We knew it was a crossover success because we were not only giving it to our kids, but we were also giving it to our parents and getting great responses from both, which was really the first inkling we had that it was going to be huge for both teenagers and adults. The early enthusiasm was at such a high level that we knew even before it was coming out that we had something really big and really special. But it was after it came out and people started to read it and react to it that, I mean, the evidence was there. I mean, we had Stephen King in Entertainment Weekly, we had Stephanie Meyer, we had John Green in the New York Times Book Review, all weighing in and loving it, which was just a very diverse group of people weighing in.
I remember Stephen King's review of Hunger Games was the first time I really read the name, and King was enormously effusive in his praise for it. He recognized his voice, and he recognizes somebody who has a real ear for character, and that's what he praised in Collins's work, was the way she built her world.
I think it's one of the wonderful things about this opportunity, that even though you're here and even though it's just for a little while, you get to enjoy all of this. I was a bit of a super nerd fan from the get-go, and I was that person who, you know, helped start the trend of like passing it around to my girlfriends and my sister and ruining their lives with it. You know, it's like, put away 3 days of your life because this is all you're gonna do in your free time is read The Hunger Games.
I think books like Harry Potter or Hunger Games, I mean, do draw in people and make them realize how meaningful books can be and how you can discuss books with friends, and can be just as engrossing as TV or video games or things like that.
Well, I'd actually never heard of the Hunger Games until it was announced that it was going to be my all-school read, which meant that everybody in the school had to read it.
It's a chance for all of us on campus to read one book, so faculty, staff, students all come together, read a book over the summer.
It's one of the few things we do that a 12th grader and a 7th grader end up talking about a book. There's social events or sort of public events where the kids get together, but not as often whereas it's surrounding something that they've read or something that they've studied. So it's nice to be able to have one of those right at the start of the year to sort of bring the school together.
In the last few years, we've used a student committee to select the book that they think would be best for all of the students to read.
And we came up with a master list of, I think, like 10 books that we want to choose from, and then from there we narrowed it down to the Hunger Games.
The challenge is finding a book that appeals to a 12-year-old and appeals to an 18-year-old, and then, oh, by the way, let's make sure it appeals to the faculty in the process as well. So, yeah, it's a challenge.
I feel like there's a certain amount of excitement and fantasy, and it's violent, but that violence is in the context of a world which, to me, a 7th grader can understand.
Not gonna lie, I don't often read the old school read, but all of my friends are like, oh, Jack, you've got to read it, like you're gonna love this book. And I cracked it open, and I must have finished it in 2 hours. And I bought the next one, and then I read that in a day. Like, I was obsessed with them, and I got the 3rd book at midnight, like right when it came out, and read that immediately, and I got one of my other friends outside of school obsessed with it, and I became like a hardcore fan.
Reading doesn't always grabbed my attention, but the Hunger Games really did. It was kind of like, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? I'm not going to put the book down.
Well, I'm happy that the last 15 years we have seen this kind of resurgence in reading. It's great to see that kids are involved in books, and I think what does it are worlds that they either can lose themselves in for escapism or in which they recognize something true. I don't think the Hunger Games is escapism. I think the Hunger Games is the opposite case. I think it's them recognizing that this is the world we live in, exaggerated.
I think the reason it can span all of those age groups is because it's looking at moral and ethical issues that, I mean, anybody of any age, of any gender, of any country, any region can really relate to. I mean, you're looking at things like war and poverty and hunger and sacrifice and love and just general themes that anybody can understand. If you're a teenager, maybe you're looking at it thinking, that would be crazy if this was happening to me because I'm 14 years old and I could go into the Hunger Games.
It's an allegory of this imperial power, of this oligarchy of the multi-rich, of this 0.1%.
As we got deeper and deeper into the development of the material, it was impossible not to analogize to the world around us.
They see a country of very, very wealthy politicians and people who are well off who are willing to send other people's kids overseas to a war that is untenable for 15 or 20 years.
It's interesting because, I mean, again, the books were written so much in the heart and the frustration of the Bush era. And so in many ways, I think the commentary there is very much written in the last regime. I mean, certainly the feelings haven't gone away about people's feelings of disenfranchisement. And I think it is interesting that it continues to be relevant.
With Collins, I think she caught it at the right time as it was ascending. And now what's happening is we're living through the material she was dealing with where you make a choice. Are we going to let this get away from us, or are we going to address this? Obviously, it's not going to be open revolution in the streets of Panem like it is in the books, but I think there are major changes coming, and I think there have to be situations addressed. I think that her books will continue to resonate over the next few years. It's going to be fascinating to see how real life and her work sort of plays parallel over the course of the next couple of years of releases.
Oh, yeah, I think this so clearly and carefully exquisite. I think when the people who occupy Wall Street and occupy L.A., out of those people will come a leader. It has to. It's time. It's absolutely time.
I think there's just something that everybody can relate to immediately in looking at a book that is about such horrific events, but is really not that far-fetched from the things that are kind of happening that we're seeing going on today.
And that's what's happening here is it's important to people because they feel it says something about the way they're living right now.
And when a book can capture that much attention from so many different quarters, yeah, that's when you know you have lightning in a bottle. That's when you know that this isn't just one of the best things you're publishing, but it is also going to be one of the most popular things you're publishing.
They just want a good show. That's all they want.
There's 24 of us, Gail. Only one comes out.
I mean, I think early on we knew that it would make a pretty fantastic movie. I mean, we don't publish books so they can be turned into movies, but it's always pretty awesome when that happens, when it is the right book. And certainly there was something inherently cinematic about The Hunger Games, not insofar, I'm not saying that Suzanne wrote it to be a movie. I think she very much wrote it to be a book. But when seeing the sequence of events and the storytelling, you could see how a filmmaker could adapt that storytelling to the screen.
It's one of those things that I think you always hope and wish for, because who doesn't want to see their favorite books come to life on the screen?
Brian Unkeles, who works for me, we're a very small company. It's basically Brian and myself and a couple of assistants. He was a fan.
I was a fan of Suzanne's because I had read the Gregor series and really loved her writing, and so was excited to see that she had a new book coming.
And so he read Hunger Games, and it was shortly after it had been published in 2008.
I remember I was actually it was so into the books that it was actually hard for me to pull away to even write Nina an email that she should read the books. It was right after the Tracker Jacker scene, and I needed to know how the book ended. And so I remember writing her, like, you have to read this, but I'm going to dive right back in.
I read it, and I couldn't put it down, couldn't stop thinking about it. Became sort of obsessed with the idea of producing it, fixated on the idea as though the thought that anybody else could produce it was unbearable to me.
After the book had come out and was really starting to be a huge success and a word-of-mouth success, that's when a lot of the movie interest happened. And the agents, Jason Dravis, the movie agent, Rosemary Stamola, the literary agent, I mean, they really coordinated very carefully who it was going to go out to and sort of who could make a pitch for it.
We talked a lot about what the movie could be, should be, but also what it could become.
She really understood exactly what the books were about. And for an author, that's always the thing you want to hear most. Not the person who's going to spend the most money, not the person who wants to blow the most things up. It really is who really gets what this book is about. And this is a book that could so easily been made the wrong way. And you really had to be careful to find the right people who would make it exactly the right way, in that it would not become the thing that it's criticizing.
Even though The Hunger Games hadn't yet become this well-known property, that it needed to be protected as fiercely as any brand, because the potential for it to go wrong was so great.
And through many conversations with Suzanne and her representatives and the producers, we were able to convey our approach to it, and they felt, I believe, passionate about going with us.
As a publisher, you always hope that the best books become the most popular books, and you also know deep in your heart that that is just not the way it works. And so it's been extraordinary to see the books become a phenomenon, not just because obviously there's so many readers reading them and reacting to them, but because they are reacting to them in such a thoughtful manner. It is a book you want to discuss. It's a book that you want to just understand what it's about, and you really do try to figure out what Katniss is all about. And I think that's been so gratifying to see, not just the engagement on a numerical level, but engagement on the depth level. And again, knowing that the movie is just going to only increase that.